Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Loan Officer Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Kiles, and we are powered by the Mortgage Marketing Animals. And today we are in for a treat. One of my dear friends, Kevin Gillespie, is with us. And what's so cool about Kevin, many of you know we've had him on the podcast a couple of times, but not only is he a producing branch manager and wildly successful, Kevin also runs our Branch Managers Academy with the Freedom Club and is helping coach, I mean, a huge number of members, specifically branch managers and company owners, on how to continue to thrive in today's environment. And he is honestly one of the best coaches in the entire country. There's nobody who knows more or how to dig deeper into a P&L and profitability and morale and culture and how to truly lead your teams with effectiveness, profitability. I mean, he's an amazing guy, has become an amazing friend. And so, Kevin, we are thrilled to have you today on the podcast. What's up, my buddy?
Well, hey, thank you. You do me an honor. I appreciate it. But the reason I wanted to do this podcast today, Steve, I hope I'm not throwing you a curveball, is you've been such a blessing in my life and to so many others in the club and in the industry. And you give so much. You got such a great heart and know so much. You know, and I thought you're kind of like Larry King, always interviewing everybody else. And I don't know that people know enough about you, and they need to, because you were truly awesome. So I'm going to turn tables on you today, if it's all right. I'd like to interview you.
I'd love that, man. It's funny. I'd love it. Come on. Are you kidding? There's nobody better to do an interview with than my good friend.
Okay.
Kevin,
Well, then
let's do it.
Before we jump into the mortgage business, and we'll get there pretty quickly, guys, tell a little bit about your background. The way you were brought up and raised and what you did before you got in the business.
Yeah. It's funny. So I, and we were just talking about this, but in my late teens, early 20s, and I came from a low middle class. And when I mean low middle class family, it's really probably a lower class. And it didn't have to do with work ethic. It had to do with money, So my dad was a restaurant manager. There were 6 of us in the family. And, I remember that we actually qualified for food stamps at school, but my dad was too proud to let us take them. So he would work to provide for the family. And we didn't have much, but man, it was a great environment to grow up in. And a tremendous work ethic. I never saw anybody work harder than my dad. And so we started working when we were 15. I got a concrete construction job digging ditches. And man, we would work every weekend, every holiday, every summer. Since I was 15, we did construction, then we did landscaping, lawn maintenance. And then my brother and I were entrepreneurial. We got into a t-shirt business, and then we started a gold plating business where we would gold plate cars at dealerships. And then eventually got into real estate. Like in our early 20s, we were able to, we were so fascinated. We watched one of these get rich quick guys, Russ Dalby, out of Florida. It was so crazy. And he was like, you can buy a house with no money down and you can flip it and you can be a millionaire. And we just were gullible enough to believe it. And we did it, man. We bought our first house. We paid $6,000. And Kevin, I didn't even have $6,000. I borrowed $1,000 on my credit card. My twin brother borrowed $1,000 on his, and we convinced another guy to do $2,000. And we convinced the seller to hold a $2,000 note for 30 days. Now that's creative, but we mowed the yard and we sold it for $10,000. And we thought we had hit the lottery, man. From $6,000 to $10,000 in a week. We bought another house. We spent, I think we paid, what was it, 18 for it, sold it for 32, and then held the note on a portion of it at 14. I mean, it was so cool because we're actually making money doing real estate. We loved it. And then about 2 years later, we lost everything. The guy we partnered with had a lot of real estate. We were funding through renovating and doing all this. And we ended up losing a ton of money. And at the age of 23, 24, right before we got married, we ended up with $250,000 in debt, 4 houses going into foreclosure, literally had lost everything. But Kevin, I'll never forget, I was newly married. I was broke. I was just praying about, okay, what do I do? We had loved real estate. We had horrible mortgage experiences. At the time, I didn't even know it was a mortgage. It was just like a loan to get the house. And I really felt like God spoke to my heart and said, and not feel like, I know there's 2 times I know what I was supposed to do. And one of them was to marry my beautiful wife, Stephanie, and the other one was to get in the mortgage business. Kevin, we didn't even know, like, I didn't even know mortgage was spelled with two G's. Like, to be candid, like, spelling's not my strength. I can sell, not spell. But it was so foreign to me. I just was moving out of obedience. I knew that I was called to the mortgage business. And what did that mean? I don't know. I didn't know how much money could be made. So here's what I did. I was leading worship. I was a musician since I was 15, and I was playing at a church here in Houston. I had got hired to do music for the young adults. And in that experience, the worship leader's husband was in the mortgage business. And so his name was Marcus. And I approached Marcus. I said, "Hey, I'm supposed to get in the mortgage business. I don't know anything about it. Will you train me?" And he said, "No." I said, "Okay, well, that didn't work well."
Wow.
He said, "Man, we don't train guys. They don't last anyway. It's 100% commission. You're going to hate it." And I said, No. So for months of pursuing him, he finally said, "Great, show up at my office tomorrow at 8 a.m. and we'll see." And so from there on, I literally would show up at his office at 8 a.m. and I would sit on the floor originally because the office was so small. He didn't even have an extra desk and chair. And I waited tables at a restaurant to pay the bills. Because by this time, when I got married, I'd stopped doing music and I realized, man, I got to focus on a career. And so I was waiting tables at night, learning the mortgage business from 8 to noon, 8 to 1. And then I'd go into the night shift at a restaurant. And that's how I got into the business, man. And it was just,
But I want to come back to that. But the other thing you mentioned, and one of the things I'm so appreciative of, is you are truly a man of faith, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're active in your church, your brother's active in it, your whole family, and you truly, and that's, I mean, you got a heart of gold. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I don't normally talk as much. Man, I love Jesus. I love my relationship with God. And you know what? I just think that out of that comes purpose in life and significance for me. And I know there's people who listen to the podcast that are from all different religions and all different walks of life. And that's not to exclude or alienate. But for me, I just believe that it's what gives me the ability to be life-giving in what we do. Mortgages are more than money. And I think you've got to find something that's bigger than yourself. You know, I've been around people, Kevin, you and I mean, you've literally ran amazing mortgage companies, and there's kind of two lanes. Some guys that get in because it's like, hey, I'm going to make all the money and run regardless the cost. We saw that a lot before the markets crashed in 07, 08, 09. There were guys and girls that were slapping 3 and 4 points on people and taking advantage of people. Yeah. And then there's another class that says, hey, this is more about making an impact and making a difference. And for me, I knew that I was called to the mortgage business. And what's so cool about it is my faith, like when it's about people, then it becomes life-giving. It's about making a difference. It's about serving others instead of demanding others. It's about leading through servanthood, then demanding output and performance and results. Now, do we need results? Yeah, results keep us here. But what we have to do is we have to lead from a different place, not of obligation. You know, it goes back to, there's two camps. I get to, or I got to. And we just came from the place of, man, I get the opportunity of serving this industry, of serving, you know, Kevin, like you and I, man, it's not a demand. It's like, I get to be a part of what you're doing. And I feel so honored. And that's what makes it so fun, is like, even with Carl, it's like, there's no demand. There's an opportunity to serve. And, you know, I look at our, even at the company I'm at the mortgage company where our branch is out of, I get the opportunity to serve Owen and Kevin and the lead team that lead our organization, that give me an opportunity every day to show up big. And here's what's so cool, Kevin. You know what you get? You reap the fruit of what you're willing to sow. What an amazing industry. You know, I heard this one time, a long time ago. I can't control outcomes, but I can control input. And there's such a paradigm. And I think my faith helps me with that, because, man, there's a different perspective in it. It's about it's about calling, it's about purpose, it's about making a difference. And together we can be better. And, you know, here's what I don't want to do. And it was funny. We're building this branch. And I think you know a little bit about my goals. if we do what we're working on right now, we'll be only one of a handful of people in the country that have done it. And somebody asked me the other day, they said, why is that important to you? And I said, the goal isn't important. What's important is that I don't leave any potential on the table. And I haven't hit my potential. And you haven't hit yours.
What a great observation.
It's about potential. And then when you got people around you, it was funny. I was coaching our branch, and now, like a year ago, there were a handful of us, and now there's a huge group of us. And I just told them, I said, how I know you haven't hit your potential is that you have been aligned here. I feel like God has placed you in our branch and placed you in my life, because we won't settle until we hit our potential. And when we hit potential, then we say, man, this feels great, because we're living fully where we need to be. But until then, I believe healthy things grow. And I think that comes from the perspective of my faith. So
I love it. So now you talked about you would go into this guy's office and sit on the floor and learn the mortgage business.
Yeah.
Did the mortgage business just come easy to you and you're an instant success? No. There's a lot of people right now struggling. They haven't seen a market like this. Right. And so because I think the struggle sometimes is more important than all your success. And we'll talk about your success, but talk about your struggle, because it'll help people right now. Does that make sense?
Hey, well, I appreciate you saying that, because we do see everybody's highlight reels and not really the valleys. And I'll tell you this, Kevin, there was no plan B. When I got in, and let me go back and circle back around when we lost all that money, and my twin brother and I lost everything. When I say everything, I mean, we lost everything. But the coolest thing about and this is where you asked about faith. I always believed when I looked in my hands, it wasn't enough. It was my seed. And we sowed our way out of paying everybody back. Kevin, every handshake, because we were the youngest kids to get a line of credit from the bank. We were trusted. We were, people put their faith in us. We paid every person. It took us 10 years. We paid every debt, every obligation, pulled every home out of foreclosure, and we paid every person every penny that was owed, and that was not required. And that was the path I had. So when you talk about how was it, I was newly married, 25. My wife was 23. We were broke, and I was trying to break into the mortgage industry, waiting tables at night. You tell me how that was. That was awful. That was awful.
Hey, did you ever listen? Because I'm the same way. I married Janice. She had 2 kids. I adopted them. We had soon, in the first couple of years, 2 more. And I got in the mortgage business in the early 80s at the oil crunch. Did you ever watch that movie, It's a Wonderful Life, and feel like that's my story? Because that's what Jimmy Stewart was, right? He was an original mortgage banker.
I love it. Well, and here's the thing is I knew I was called to it, and I feel like I'm a pretty quick study, but Kevin, I think I made less than $18,000 my first full year. I only closed maybe, I want to say 12 loans, maybe 14 loans that whole year. And with my split, I made less than 18. And it was one of those things. It was funny. I was with somebody a month ago, and she told me, she said, my first year I closed 17 million. I'm like, you killed it. Are you kidding? I mean, I was lucky to make $17,000 or $18,000 that year. And what I realized was it made me better because there was no plan B. So every day you're just fighting for the inches. And Kevin, some of our listeners won't even believe this, but that was when you couldn't automate your pricing. We got rate sheets, and I'm only 45. So I'm not that old, but literally you had to have original bank statements, original W-2s. Underwriters couldn't even accept fax copies. And so it was in a time where not only was it hard, but then you're breaking in. And Kevin, it was the end of one of the biggest refinance booms they had seen up until that time. I couldn't catch a loan to save my life. And the ones I was catching were $80,000 investor loans, because that's what I felt comfortable with. And that's where it just began this journey. So I struggled for the next few years, but I never gave up. And then, there was a point my wife joined us in 2005, and then we continued to grow and we saw success. And then, I joined some coaching, and I got to tell you, once I started becoming a part of a community of people that are being coached, everything changed. Now, Kevin, I'll tell you this, had I had the marketing animals when I started, I believe I would have hit big numbers my first year, because I love what Carl said a couple of weeks ago. He said there's 4 types of people: people who don't have a plan, people whose plan is no good, people who have a plan but their execution stinks, or the fourth one is someone who has 1, 2, or 3, but they're making excuses and say the market, the industry, and they're blaming everything for their results currently. There's only 4 types. And what I love about the marketing animals is we got the plan. It is a great plan, and we know how to execute it so that you get results. Kevin, that's what's taken you and me and the team of coaches that have developed the content for the marketing animals 20 years to build. I know
we have people doing their best years ever. Several of the people I coach right now, knocking it out of the park.
And even how many people in the business, like I'm thinking of, who's our guy? He was on the podcast. It just escaped me. He did $1 million W-2 in his third year in the business. Well, because he followed a plan. And so what I love about it is, was it easy? No, but you didn't give up. You don't fail. You don't lose unless you quit. And I think that in the peaks, in the valleys, you have to maintain consistency, because you're going to have months where you're celebrating and you're breaking through. And you're going to have months where you just feel like, even last month, how many people are listening? I know for my personal production team, we lost more loans than we have lost in a year in a month. And you're just sitting there saying, okay, this too will pass. We get better at processes. We get better at design conversations. We stay in a community. We understand the markets won't last forever, but we're going to stay doing the right activity consistently the same way every time. The DSP matters. So when we got started, it was just really, Kevin, just sheer grit. You're just like, I will not quit. I will not quit.
So was it coaching, or what was the 1 or 2 or maybe 3 things that really?
Coaching was the difference maker. Coaching. Yeah. And it wasn't the coach as much as the community. And that's what I love, what we're building. And
we got the most sharing, giving people. Mm-hmm.
100%. Well, and here's what's the coolest thing is when you can call a Kevin Gillespie and say, hey, brother, what do you think are the biggest challenges we're facing in the next 3 to 5 months? Kevin, hey, how do I run this P&L tighter? Kevin, who do you know that has already walked through this that I could talk to, that could maybe breathe insight so I don't have to go through as much pain? And the proximity to relationship comes from a community, which is what the Freedom Club is, that says, hey, listen, we've all got pain, but we're all winning in different areas. Like, I'm winning in a different area than you are. So if you share your ideas and your strategies that have proven results, guess what? I can get better than that and not have to go through the 2 or 3 years of pain you went through. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. What do you think is really your strength, your superpower? And then we all have challenges as much as we've grown. What are still some of the challenges you wrestle with?
Yeah, I would say that the superpower for me is system, structures, and script. Like one of my spiritual gifts, and it's not just a spiritual gift, but one of my giftings. So we've done a lot of testing. There's a spiritual gifts test. There's a natural gifts test. There's the DISC test. There's Enneagram. I mean, there's all these ones, but one of my top that always comes to the top is strategic. So for me, I can look at a Rubik's Cube that's very complex, and I already see the finish line and can say, here's how we do it. But that's also the challenging part for me is I'm great at identifying and putting together a plan, but I have to put good people around me who can execute in detail and consistently execute with detail. So that's probably my greatest weakness is the place where I started to excel was when I didn't have to take every phone call, Kevin. When I didn't have to take every pre-approval, when I didn't have to have 6 loan consultations every single day or 8 loan consultations every single day. As I started building the team, in the beginning, Kevin, here's what we do. What do? We go meet the agents, we build the relationships, we take the lead, we pre-approve them, we work through the documentation, we set up the file, we follow them pre-approved and looking, we help them lock it in, we hand it off, and then chase conditions as needed. The first thing you've got to do, and this is where we would have grown faster.
So when you start out, you are both sales and fulfillment.
You're doing it all. And the thing you've got to do quickly, what would have shaved 10 years off of my growth would have been if I would have taken the first step to hire quicker. Because what we realize is if I can hire somebody to do the non A activities, the non bringing in the business activities, then it allows me to stay focused on that, on going and getting more business in the relationship side, which tends to be the toughest for most people. And so if I would have hired quicker, then I would have got out of it faster. And what my gift was is I always knew these are the steps. Hey, if we can keep moving these things forward. But my struggle was I wasn't willing to hire. And here's what we do now. I got to tell you, man, I'm probably one of the fastest hirers. But I do it profitably. And like, I'll give you an example. We just had one of our loan partners we had to let go. I hate doing that, but we cannot have B players when this market demands A+ players. So what I've learned to do quickly is, hey, we got to hire fast, move to profitability, but we don't keep somebody who's a B. We got to keep hiring A players and being willing to move and position people into the right position on the bus, because I think we tend to have an undying loyalty that says, I will do this forever with this person. But what we fail to realize is we may be holding them back from their potential if they're not thriving in the position they're currently in.
It's a good job market out there. If they're not in their right place, we owe it to them.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to, we give opportunities, not jobs. That's the biggest lesson Carl taught me last year was, hey, listen, I'm not responsible for your opportunity. Your results tell me what you did with the opportunity.
Yeah.
And if you've gone 3 months and you don't have the results, then that works, but it doesn't work here. It's not available here.
So, but you had so many great nuggets there that you just went through. I want to ask you about one. Why do you think on these engineered conversations, structured conversations we know work, why do people fight that so much? Because you are by far the best I've ever seen at
it. Well, thank you for that. And one thing, why do people struggle with it? Because, Kevin, I think there's a misunderstanding that a script is cold and callous. And it's not cold and callous, it's repeatable. It's something that you can predictably, like if I say this phrase at the end of a loan consultation and say, is there anything that would prevent me from being your lender? I know now that I can measure the results of that one ask at the end of every loan consultation. And so I don't think people understand the importance of consistency. Because see, Kevin, if I have the same conversation 10 different ways, how do you measure the result?
Yep.
And I'll never forget what Ron Lemon told me. One of my mentors, I don't know, 15 years ago, he would say, Steve, he'd say this, he'd grab me by the cheek. He'd say, son, you can't manage what you don't measure. You can't manage what you don't measure. He'd grab him by the cheek. Hey, son. And he would do it. I was in my 20s. He had retired a bank president, and he was mentoring me every week. We'd meet for breakfast. And I'll never forget those words. And so I think we don't understand the importance of consistency the same way every time. How do we get off the phone? We ask for the business the same way every time. How do we go through an initial first call? The same way every time. Why? Because look, if I can say it and get a result, I can hire Sabrina, who would say it and get the result. She could hire Miranda, true story, who could say it and get the same result, who now hired Kayla, who can say it, get the same result. And guess what? Kayla now answers the phone for all of the market, and she can get the same result. And so what I began to realize very quickly was same way every time tells us that we should be able to measure the results regardless of personality. But the problem is, it's good and bad. If I'm saying it the same way every time and I'm not getting the results, I can keep pivoting and tweaking. It's like a ham radio. I'm trying to dial in that frequency, because oftentimes it's not the whole phrase that sinks the ship. It may just be one or two words placed in a better position will give you a higher rate of return or higher conversion. And I think we have to embrace. Here's the other reason why, Kevin. What are loan officers? Me included. They're big personalities.
Absolutely.
Dude, you know what? I could close a fish. I mean, I could sell ice to somebody who's sitting in a snowstorm, and that's good. But when you try to get out of every aspect of your business, how would your loan partner everybody think about your A-player loan partner that you have right now. Can they have 95% of the same conversations you're having and produce the same results? And I would tell you this, Kevin, most of the people listening would say no. You know what I get to say? Mine do.
Yeah.
Mine do. And we measure the results. We measure the conversion. We measure the conversations the same way every time. And so if you say they can't, then I would go back to the previous episodes of the podcast. People don't realize this either, Kevin. And I thank you for asking me all these questions, but I designed this podcast to train my team. Like I literally have my team go through every episode of this podcast. Like I'm sending it to Sabrina and Miranda and the back end loan partners in our branch. Like we did one a few episodes back about validate, educate, and instruct. That was for this audience, but let me be selfish. That was really for my team. I saw a problem arise. We address it, and then they start working through it the same way every time. Now they've got a way to overcome.
The key is you're serving both audiences, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what advice?
But it goes back to design conversations, and that's what I love about it is because when it's the same way, the same conversation, you can get the same results.
Yeah. Okay. So what advice for somebody in the business and they're struggling in this market? They've never seen a market like this before, like you and I have back in 2008 or others.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them right now to make it through and still grow?
You got to have a plan, and you got to know how to execute that plan. And then you've got to have the discipline to execute the plan. So have a plan, know how to execute the plan, and execute the plan daily. And I'll tell you, if you're listening today and you don't have a plan or you don't know how to continue to execute a plan, go to freedomplanningcall.com. I would love for you to go to freedomplanningcall.com. This is a link for anyone who says, I need a plan. And we're going to give you a 45-minute strategy call with Mike or Erica or Ralph, literally one of the best people in the industry to help you build a plan. So Kevin, somebody says, I want to have my best month ever. I'm thinking about loan officers in my branch right now having their best months ever in this environment. It's because they have a plan. They know what to do or how to execute the plan, and they're executing the plan. And Kevin, here's how simple it is. I was literally coaching my team this morning, my personal production team. And I just said, look, it is no more than this. You need 13 talk tos a day, outbound conversations. And if you want to double down, get 26 outbound conversations a day. That's it. You have 13 outbound proactive conversations that lead to face-to-face appointments where you're asking for the business with qualified agents, Kevin. You cannot help but grow and thrive in today's environment. Here's what they'll say, but I don't have enough leads. Double the activity. I still don't have enough leads. Triple the activity. The only way out of this is to act out of it, to give more input, to get more output. There's no other way. Well, Steve, I don't want to make the calls. Awesome. Hire somebody that makes the calls. Well, their calls are ineffective. Get rid of them and hire another person that is effective in the calls.
But you are so focused and so positive. And it's what advice would you give for people to stop thinking that the market's lacking? Because there's opportunity out there.
Stop listening to the news.
Great.
Hey, well, I have gotten off of, and I know this sounds crazy because we're a social media environment, but I've literally tried to get, like I spend maybe 5 minutes now a day on social media. I absolutely do not watch any news. The other day, I literally turned on Fox News flying home from Michigan, literally yesterday. I could only watch it for 5 minutes. And I'm like, you got to turn off the news. You got to turn off the radio. You got to get off social media, and you've got to find you got to find resources like John Maxwell. You got to find, my brother has an unbelievable book called Unstuck and Unstoppable. It just came out, like his podcast. I'm thinking about Ed Milet has a great podcast. Maxwell's got a podcast.
I love
Craig
that.
Groeschel. Yeah. Well, listen, Craig Groeschel's got one on leadership. So when others are filling their mind with pundits and naysayers and garbage and trash, I'm trying to fill my mind with TD Jakes and Stephen Furtick and Craig Groeschel and John Maxwell. And it's like garbage in, garbage out, good in, good out. And if you say, Steve, I'm at the end and I have nothing left, like I wake up and listen, we all do, man. When I lost the business I lost last month, Kevin, I was probably discouraged is a better word, for over a week. And you know what happens, Kevin, to leaders? Oh, 100%, brother, 100%. Because I'm building this amazing brand.
Never saw it.
Well, but that's the whole deal. Guys like you and I, leaders don't have an option to show up bad. Whether you feel it or not, you lace up and show up. Whether you feel it or not, you lace up and show up. Whether you feel it or not, you lace up and show it. Kevin, that went back to the days I was doing construction. I was 15 years old, digging literally 4-foot deep ditches by 2 foot to drop steel in for commercial buildings. And I'll never forget the first day I told Mom, she picked me up. She dropped us off. She picked us up. I said, I quit. She said, son, go take a shower, because I was sunburnt because I wore a short sleeve shirt, not understanding Texas heat. She said, you'll never quit. She took me the next day. I showed up. I said, I quit. She said, you're not quitting on my watch. And literally, she forced us to finish the whole summer working for this guy. And I learned an invaluable lesson. You never quit. You quit when it's right. You don't quit because it's painful. If the direction of your life says this season is done, you're allowed to resign that season. And see, that was another thing, Kevin, I got to say this, dude, these questions are great. What I learned this year with my son was, here was my motto: Kyle's don't quit. And then Carl challenged me with something last year. And that's why he's such a great friend. He said, Steve, because I told him one day, I said, man, I'm just encouraging my son, Kyle's don't quit. He said, Steve, what if quitting's the best thing he could have ever done? And I really realized this. And this is what I told my son, because he wanted to quit football because it got hard. And I said, Ethan, you're allowed to quit when the season of your life changes. We don't quit when it's hard. We don't quit when I don't feel like it. We don't quit because the emotion is there. You quit when you know God has shut the chapter of that season. Then you can resign and say, you know what? I've done everything I was supposed to do. I was perfect. And I love this. My pastor used to say it all the time: be perfect in your season.
Ooh, I like that.
And if that season is over, you're allowed to quit. Why? Because quitting isn't failure. Quitting is shutting a season. It's being, I was perfect in that season. But if we're quitting, and here's where this season right now in the mortgage industry, if you have been called to a different industry, quit. If you have not, then lace up and show up. Lace up and show up. And then you say, well, I don't have a plan. We can help you with it. Link arms with people like Kevin and myself and the marketing animals that have a plan that's working. And so I just think that we have to define, we don't quit because of emotion. We quit because it's a changing season.
So how, with all this and what's going on, we got to stay focused and double down. And I agree with everything you've said. How do you keep work-life balance?
You walk in I walk in at 8. I walk out at 4:30. That's how you do it. And
during that time, and you're focused, but after that, you just leave it at the.
I maximize every single minute.
You do. You're one of the few people I know that
every minute, every 30 minutes I'm scheduled, and sometimes that scheduled 30 minutes may have 4 calls in it. And so literally from the moment I walk in, and really it's 7:30 my time, because I'll do the breakfast club and then run into my days, but it's 8 to 4:30. I'm driving by 4:30. And that's usually when I call Carl. Carl and I have our 20-minute call while I'm driving home. But I'll tell you, Kevin, it's because you have to live discipline. If I'm going to make it, I can get more done from 8 to 4:30 than most people can do in a 40-hour work week. Yeah. And it's because here's the interesting thing too, Kevin. I'm not a high C. I'm a high ID. The reason I've learned to do it is the discipline of leaning into my calendar, because if I can maximize every 30 minutes, then that means I'm so on purpose. Carl says, putting your war paint on. I love that analogy. Yeah. I put my war paint on so that I can show up for my kids when I walk in the door, and I don't take phone calls in the evening. Now, I'll tell you this though, that's not where I was. I have built a team. I've built processes and systems, many of which are shared on the podcast. But there were times where I didn't show up big for my kids, but that's part of the passion of design conversations, the passion of having a clear process of systems and structure. It's why we do it the same way every time. And so what we've done is I've been able to hire one, then we were a little more profitable. I hired another. We were a little more profitable. I hired another. And I think in doing that in the beginning, you just got to decide, hey, I'm done at 5 and I don't take more calls. Well, what if you lose business? My family's worth more than one loan. It just is. And that's okay. Or you're going to make a decision that it's not. And that's okay too. If that's what you want, if that's what you want when your kids are 20 and they resent you because you didn't spend time with them, which was the path, Kevin, I was on. Up until about 2 years ago, I was on that path. I would work just like my dad did, 60, 80 hours a week. I would get in at 6 a.m. and I would leave at 7 p.m. And I did that Monday through Saturday. And it hasn't been until the last probably 3 years moving into that direction of a healthy life of, you know what, I'm not losing my 10-year-old. I'm not losing my 7-year-old. I'm not losing my 5-year-old because I chose work over their lives.
Good for you. So obviously you've had your ups and downs and challenges in the business, and you're hugely successful. You've got this incredible branch. You give back in your coaching and your podcast. Anything that you look at that you go, boy, I'd do this differently. I would, whatever, family, business, anything that would maybe help somebody from making a mistake?
I mean, hey, that's a great, I'm just trying to think. You asked, I think it's actually two questions you asked. Would I do it differently? Knowing what I know now, I wouldn't do the trajectory different because I am who I am today because of the pain and the challenges I walked through. Okay, looking back, what I would tell somebody who is 10 years behind where, like, let's say, like even if you're 5 years, looking back, here's what I would tell you is this. If you will follow the daily success plan, the only thing that moves the needle the most in today's environment is how many outbound calls, and it's not the number of calls, it's the talk tos that lead to appointments that close for the business. That is the only three things that move the biggest needle in this industry. And had I known that 20 years ago, I would have had more effective calls, more effective face-to-face appointments, and not been scared to ask for the business. In my business, if I would have known that on the sales side, I would have been so much further faster. The second thing is this: you have to live by a calendar that reflects your values. If you value prospecting from 9 to 11, you have to make 2 hours of outbound calls every day. And I would have taught myself how to live by a calendar much sooner because of the effectiveness it produces. And then the third thing would be this: you got to hire and trust your team. And if I would have let go of control sooner, we would have been further faster. The reason my branch is seeing the growth it's seen in the last 12 months is because the first time in my life, I trust the people that are here. And not only trust them, I just stopped. I had to, because we were growing so fast. But then what I learned was if I'll empower the right people, we will grow exponentially fast. And so it's do the right sales activity. Don't get distracted with widgets, ads, attending appointment. Like literally people are intoxicated with doing a realtor event with 200 realtors. When you ask them how many were qualified, there's 5. Why didn't you just go take those 5 to a one-on-one appointment? You'd have got further faster. Yep. And so the sales is right. Live by your calendar and hire and trust the people you hire. And the part of this, and here's the last piece with that. When you know, like I'll tell you, I just had a relationship that worked for us that we just separated ways. Within the first 2 weeks, I literally said, I don't think this is going to work out. And at day 45, I finally let her go. And it was interesting. Carl asked me a question. He said, did you ever have a concern? And I said, yes. He said, you didn't follow your concern. If you have a concern, it's not the right person. You got to go. Wow. And I would let them go faster, because what I've learned is we will fund a deficit in order to try to help them and forget that we gave them an opportunity, not a job.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and our P&Ls suffer, brother. I mean, they suffer immensely.
This is, I'm looking at the time, and I know you got to go. I've got to, but so I want to but there's so many nuggets. I could talk to you all day. I'm just loving this. This is great. And I'm sure everybody listening's loving it. Any closing thoughts?
Don't give up. Two of the biggest things, a friend of mine, Jeremy, one time said, he told me this 5 years ago: life moves at the speed of relationships. If you want to run fast and go far, you have to be connected to the right people. And I will tell you that I am doing today what I am because of my relationship with you, my relationship with Carl, Tammy, Diane, the marketing animals, and the Freedom Club. When I can call Robert and say, dude, what are you doing here? Who's running a $600 million branch. And I can call Heath and John, who are running a $400 million branch, and say, hey, what are you doing here? And I can call my buddy Carl, who has a $1.9 billion branch, and say, brother, what are you doing here? And I can call Kevin and say, dude, how do I structure the P&L? Or what would you do here? that is a game changer. And the single most important thing you can do outside of the activity is get connected to a group of people that are going in the same direction. And so like go to freedomplanningcall.com, talk to our team, see if this is a tribe or community you could thrive with, because it will be the difference of whether you thrive in today's environment or you sink.
So guys, what he's telling you on this call, it doesn't cost a penny to talk. Okay. So make the call. Just do yourself a favor. There's no hard sell. But
well, you and I are byproducts of it. I mean, our lives, you and I are better because of this organization.
Absolutely.
There's no question about it. So we'd love for you to join us. So that's it. Hey, well, you want me to close this out? What thoughts?
But first I want to thank you for being such a blessing in my life and so many others people. You really make a positive difference to the industry and to the world. And I love you, friend.
Man, I'm honored. Dude, you are truly one of the most remarkable people that I know, and your acumen and your knowledge and your ability to lead, not only, I mean,
you need to get to know more people then.
No, but listen, so I just want to say, and dude, I love you. I appreciate, hey, and I'm excited for those of you who are listening, our Freedom Club, we're doing our event in Tahoe. Kevin runs the first day, which is the Branch Managers Academy.
Oh, we got a great lineup.
Dude, it's amazing. And those are the things that make us better. So, hey, if you're interested, want to learn more, go to freedomplanningcall.com. Hey, also, if you've been listening to the podcast today and you say, man, this is a great resource, would you subscribe, share, and then give us a review on the podcast? Like literally right now, share it with 2 LOs that you know would benefit from this. And then make sure you subscribe so you get it every week when it comes out. And then give us a review. That always helps us. We definitely appreciate it. And Kevin, thank you again for choosing to, I mean, just for asking me questions, man. I appreciate you. Love you, brother. Excited to continue doing this together. And for everybody, just remember this: anything worth doing is worth doing badly. Just get started. See you.